Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Having a bye week and having a week off can be very beneficial for a team. It gives them an opportunity to rest and gives guys who are injured a chance to recover. For guys who are starting to feel the long grind of the season, a week off from playing and traveling and all of that can be extremely helpful. It gives student athletes a chance to catch up on any academic work that maybe fell by the wayside during the preparation for an upcoming game. It gives everyone some time off and a chance to recharge to get ready for the next part of the season. There's a reason why so many teams take a week off over the course of the regular season, especially in preparation for a big game. I think most coaching staffs around the country would agree that having a bye week in the middle of the season is a good thing. However, is there such a thing as too much rest? Ask the Boston College Eagles, because in 1983, they had an absolutely bizarre scheduling quirk that left everyone confused, puzzled, and frustrated. No one knew what to do, and something like this seemed almost unprecedented. In 1983, Boston College essentially took a vacation in the middle of their season because they had so much time off. And even though it wound up working out for the Eagles in the end, it didn't make the situation any less chaotic and any less bizarre. This is the story behind one of the strangest schedules in the history of college football. Before I talk about the schedule in question, we need some context to understand the team involved, how they were playing, and why such a bizarre thing even happened in the first place. Entering the 1983 season, it seemed like the tide was beginning to turn for the Boston College Eagles. In 1982, head coach Jack Bicknell, in just his second season, guided the team to an 8-3-1 record and a bowl game. Even though they wound up losing in the Tangerine Bowl to Auburn, this was still a remarkable season when you consider the fact that Boston College had not made a bowl game since 1942, when Denny Myers took them to the Orange Bowl. For the first time since World War II, the Eagles were going bowling, and with quarterback Doug Flutie returning in 1983, the Eagles were hoping to pick up right where they left off. And through the first half of the 1983 season, it seemed like they were doing just that. Through the first 6 weeks of the year, the Eagles were 5-1, and found themselves ranked inside the top 20. Boston College went 5-0 against unranked opponents, with their lone loss being a 10-point loss to a number 12 ranked West Virginia team. Boston College was firing on all cylinders, outscoring their opponents 195-99 for an average of 16 points per game. And it wasn't as though they were beating on cupcakes. One of those wins was a convincing 31-16 victory over Clemson, the same team that went undefeated and won the national championship in 1981, that lost just one game in 1982 and lost just one game in 1983, with that lone loss coming to Boston College. Their impressive 3-0 start to the season, which included that monumental win against Clemson, was the first time since 1976 that they started a season 3-0. And their 5-1 start through 6 weeks was the first time since 1976, and just the second time since 1958 that they were 5-1 after 6 games. Up next for Boston College was a big game against the Penn State Nittany Lions. This game was being played at Sullivan Stadium where the New England Patriots played, so anytime you're playing at an NFL stadium, you know it's legit. Penn State entered this season as the number 4 ranked team in the country, and in 1982, won the national championship after finishing the regular season 10-1, coming into the Sugar Bowl with the number 2 ranking and defeating Georgia 27-23. They also entered this game against Boston College riding a 5-game winning streak, which included wins against a number 3 ranked Alabama team and a number 4 ranked West Virginia team, which was the same West Virginia team that defeated Boston College a few weeks before. This game was absolutely huge, and was so big that it was being televised on ABC. Considering the fact that back then, each network only got to show a team 3 times in a 2-year stretch, networks had to be very selective, so the fact that ABC chose this game was huge, and was great exposure for Boston College. That was the good news. The bad news? They were going to have to wait a long time. When the Boston College schedule was planned out, the Eagles always planned to have a bye week the week after facing Yale. Remember that Boston College was an independent back in 1983, so they could design their schedule pretty much however they wanted to, as they were not at the mercy of any conference. A bye week in the middle of the season, especially after playing 2 consecutive games on the road, seemed like a good idea. On October 8th, Boston College defeated Yale 42-7. The Eagles would be off the weekend of October 15th, and then on October 22nd would host Alabama at Sullivan Stadium, as in the same Alabama team that at one point in October had the number 3 ranking in the country according to the AP poll. Having the bye week to not only rest, but to then play the gauntlet that was Alabama and Penn State in back-to-back weeks, seemed like a good idea. But then just a few weeks before the season, CBS came calling. Remember what I said earlier about networks only being allowed to televise a team 3 times in a 2-year stretch? The rule took effect in 1982, and in an effort to draw ratings and establish supremacy as the premier college football network, a bunch of networks, including CBS, decided to front-load their games and televise the best matchups possible with no regard and forward thinking for 1983. In other words, television networks in 1982 operated the same way that the Los Angeles Rams operate today. Screw the picks and screw the future, because we want to win now. And while this worked in 1982, obviously, this posed a pretty major problem in 1983 when the networks realized that they didn't have a whole lot of options left, and they had to be uber selective. CBS was looking at the available games for Thanksgiving weekend, and they weren't loving their available options. However, they loved the Boston College-Alabama game, and knew that they were going to televise that. With that, CBS came to Boston College with a proposal. Could you move your game against Alabama to Thanksgiving weekend? Initially, Boston College declined, and it's not hard to see why. It was tradition for the Eagles to end their regular season with a matchup against Holy Cross, playing the city rivalry game against the school only 8.5 miles away from them. Since 1970, with the exception of the 1978 season, when Boston College ended their regular season with a game in Japan against Temple, the Eagles always ended the year against the Crusaders. On top of that, it would be one less week to prepare for a bowl game, which the Eagles could actually realistically think about entering the 1983 season following their strong 1982 performance. It would also mean that the players don't get to spend Thanksgiving with their families, and it messes up the schedule big time. Then CBS said to Boston College, "We'll offer you $600,000. In today's money, this comes out to somewhere around $1.7 million. You'll get national television exposure on arguably the biggest college football weekend of the year, you get a Black Friday game, you get to be the sole game on television, and you get $1.7 million in today's money. All you have to do is move the game." Under those terms, Boston College accepted, and now their game against the Crimson Tide, originally scheduled for October 22nd, was moved to November 25th. But as you can probably expect, this posed quite the challenge for the Eagles. The Eagles were 5-1 and were playing some of their best football ever, and now they were going to have not 1, but 2 weeks off. And to say that the Eagles had no idea what to do about this extended time off was an understatement, because there was not a whole lot of precedent for this. As head coach Jack Bicknell said, "It's truly frustrating. We're just sitting here, stuck with all that time off. I've called coaches all over the country to get advice, and nobody has been through anything like this." And he truly wasn't kidding about no one knowing what to do about this situation. There were 23 independents in college football in 1983, and Boston College was the only one to have this double bye week in place, where they would go a full 21 days without playing a game. Even though Bicknell was trying to find the positives in this situation, like the fact that injured players would get some time to rest, and the fact that players would get to catch up on their studies and focus on their academics, he was really struggling. Now you might be asking yourself why he wasn't taking this time to game plan for Penn State and study their tendencies. And that's because the film that Penn State would give to Boston College would only be available beginning on October 24th. I talked a bit about that controversy in the NFL in a previous video of mine regarding the availability of film, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So Bicknell and the coaching staff were truly stuck here. Players were going to take that first week off to just run and weight train, and we're going to take that second week off to run the first string offense against the first string defense, which is something they do a lot of during summer camp, but not a whole lot of, if at all, during the regular season. Bicknell was worried that this extended time off was going to hurt them, especially after all the positive momentum that they built up during the season, and because pausing a season for 2 weeks like this was unfamiliar territory for just about everyone. As Bicknell said, "I've never heard of any gap like this in the middle of a season. Nothing can be done to change it. We're losing our timing and muscle tone." For $600,000 back then, or $1.7 million today, Boston College was taking a gamble to completely disrupt the flow of their season. So that raises the question, did this gamble ultimately pay off? Did the Eagles benefit from this rather crazy schedule of theirs? Amazingly enough, it all worked out in the end, and then some. On October 29th, a full 3 weeks since they last played their game, and a full 3 weeks since you looked at me, cocked your head to the side and said I'm angry, the Eagles were finally out on the field again, as they took on Penn State. And the result was a 27-17 victory to snap the Nittany Lions' 5-game winning streak. This was one of the biggest wins in program history at the time. Penn State and Boston College met 11 times before, and all 11 times, Penn State won, with 10 of them coming by multiple possessions, and with the 2 previous meetings with Bicknell as Boston College's head coach being a 38-7 defeat and a 52-17 defeat, getting outscored by 66 points over those 2 meetings combined. Finally, they got the monkey off of their back in this one-sided rivalry. If Boston College had any rust whatsoever, they didn't show it, because they truly picked up right where they left off. By the time Boston College ended the 1983 regular season, they were 9-2, with one of those wins being that rescheduled game against Alabama, where they won it 20-13. It was their first ranked win since 1980, where they defeated number 11 ranked Stanford in their second game. At one point, the Eagles were ranked number 13 in the AP poll, making it their highest ranking since the 1942 season. And for the second straight year, the Eagles were going bowling, as they took on Notre Dame in the Liberty Bowl. Even though the game did not turn out as the Eagles hoped, as they lost 19-18 in a fairly sour end to their season, especially since a win likely would have had the Eagles finish inside the top 10, it was still an incredible year, with their 9 wins being the most since the 1940 season, before World War II even happened. It would have been very easy for the season to go completely off of the rails after that bizarre break in the middle of it all, but that did not happen, as the Eagles show no signs of slowing down over the second half of 1983, even if they had every opportunity to do so. And perhaps the craziest part about all of this was that this happened in 1984 as well. After beating North Carolina on September 22nd, the Eagles had another double bye week in place before their October 13th meeting against Temple, once again at the request of CBS. Even though head coach Jack Bicknell expressed frustration about this, as he said that the team would have trouble maintaining continuity, and that it was hard to start and stop so suddenly, that at least there was a game plan in place for how to handle the break since they went through it before. For those curious, the game that was originally scheduled for September 29th that got moved to Black Friday on November 23rd, you might remember it.
Flutie flushed, throws it down, caught by Boston College, I don't believe it!
That's right. One of the most iconic plays in the history of college football, the most iconic play in Boston College's history, and maybe the most iconic play of the entire 1980s came during that game. And it's crazy to think how close it came to never happening. The year before, if Boston College accepted CBS's offer to take 21 days off, and then laid an egg during their game against Penn State, and had to shake off a ton of rust because of how long they were idle, then maybe Boston College refuses CBS requests the following year. And this game against Miami takes place on a random Saturday in September, when not a whole lot of people are watching on television. The domino effect from CBS handing Boston College $600,000 in 1983 is kind of remarkable when you really think about it. Boston College had a very strange 1983 season from a scheduling perspective. It is incredibly difficult to take 2 weeks off in a row, because it messes with everything, from your schedule, to your body strength, to your timing. The fact that the Eagles were able to do this successfully, and got a whole lot of money out of it as well, is a giant credit to Jack Bicknell and his staff. Because what Bicknell and company did in 1983, and 1984 for that matter, was the true definition of making the most out of a bad situation. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.